Thank you so much for joining us. I know a lot of people are going to be slowly making their way to the broadcast. If you're watching live, for anyone that's watching afterwards, thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening on the podcast. We really appreciate it. We are so excited to have you here. So grateful that you are taking the time to hang out with us today. It's super awesome. We actually have our first guest for this short format show. Super happy to have Mark Henick here. Mark is a mental health advocate. And Mark, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Greg. I always like talking to you.
Yeah, we have a good time. Mark, can you give everyone origin story? Just tell everyone how you got into the mental health space. You've got a master's, obviously. Just curious about your origin story.
Well, for me, all of the work that I've done in mental health for basically all of my adult life has its roots in my childhood and adolescent struggle with mental illness myself, struggling with severe and persistent depression, anxiety, and repeated suicide attempts that had me in and out of hospital more than half a dozen times. I wrote about it in my first book, so-called Normal: A Memoir of Family Depression and Resilience. And from there, I've really used that personal experience to try to change the system along the same time as I'm trying to change my own mind and make myself a better person as well. So that's what I bring to this. I try to bring the view of somebody who's been there and is trying to get somewhere else.
That's so helpful right now in this time where people are struggling with mental health. We know that mental health was an issue before COVID. It's an extraordinarily important issue now. Data from the Lancet recently showing, a journal called the Lancet, very highly regarded journal, showing that there's been about a 20 to 25% uptick in both depression and anxiety during the pandemic. The numbers are significantly higher for women than for men. So this is a crucial issue for all of us to be talking about right now. Mark, you drafted out 5 things that we can do to improve our mental health under challenging times in this post-pandemic world. The first one has to do with paying attention. Can you dive into that and give us, let's get started on the tactics?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's so key, especially now, especially when things are so hard, to stop and pay attention to the world around you. I mean, it's one of our instinctive, or at least it's one of my instinctive coping mechanisms, reactions that when things get hard, when they're emotional, when things are getting hot, if it's angry out there, whatever it is, to try to avoid, to deflect, to dissociate. Just lose yourself in your phone, lose yourself in your thoughts, whatever it is. We have to resist that urge. Because unless we can actually look at the world directly and experience everything around us, then we're just going to get lost and we're going to feel even more disconnected. So even though things are hard, hard is okay. You can do hard things. Pay attention to the world around you, and you'd be surprised what you see.
I love it. And when we bring ourselves into this present moment, be here now, I think that often helps us to stop replaying events from the past, stop worrying about events that may not have even happened yet in the future, which makes it easier to be happy and joyful. And I know that that's something that you're super interested in as well.
Absolutely. And look, a couple of years ago, I remember thinking that I was bored with the contents currently in my mind. So I needed to get more stuff into my head because I was so sick of myself that I needed something else to deal with. And this is why I think it's so important to pay attention to the world outside you in the present moment. Because when you don't, when you close all the windows and doors and turn off the lights, my stepfather used to do that when evangelists would come to the door to try to convert him. He'd tell us all to get down on the floor and he'd turn off all the lights and close the doors. Anyway, you could read about that and many other stories in my memoir. I think that when we do that, all we're left to do is recycle those thoughts in our head. And if those thoughts, the valence of them tends to skew negative, dark, unhelpful, then why would it be any more helpful just to keep recycling that same old stuff again? So you have to get more input in there.
I love it. And in like deliberately, like I don't even want to say manifesting, but deliberately driving your attention towards happiness, towards joy, towards the beauty of the world, I think can really help when it's so easy for your attention to get drawn into news headlines and all the other sort of negative inputs that are so prevalent, which then leads me into your next thought, which is all about, once we're in the present moment, once we're directing our attention towards joy and happiness, we can then perhaps begin to rebuild connection, which has been
Mm.
basically destroyed during this pandemic.
Well, this is it. I think, we have to look for and amplify that joy in our life. And this would be the second thing for me, because it's so easy, especially when things are hard and when the predominant news cycle is about bad news, which it usually is. If it bleeds, it leads. As I say, I've done a lot of media. I've seen it. I've been asked to comment on a lot of those stories too. But if we think that that's the accurate representation of the world, then of course that's how our mind will work and react. And of course our mind will be negatively skewed in that way. So we have to consciously look for the good things that are out there while we're paying attention. And this is what I call balancing the equation. If we're only ever chasing away the bad stuff, make all those bad thoughts go away, make those bad feelings go away, even though I don't think there actually are any bad feelings per se. We could do a different episode on that. But if we're always spending our energy pushing things away, then we're not amplifying the other side of the equation, the good stuff that builds us up. Okay, great, you push it away. Then what? Then what do you put in the void that the bad stuff pushed away has created? More bad stuff just flows in unless you just fill it with joyful, good, grateful things. So
Yeah.
find those grateful things in your life and amplify them. As Mary Oliver wrote, joy isn't meant to be a crumb, meant to be a feast. Enjoy it.
Nice. I love that. That's awesome. We just got a comment come through, and I want to, recognize the people that are showing up. So Faith mentions it's human nature to feel as good as possible for long periods. We end up not being able to handle distressing emotions. It's an interesting thought that it's sort of like our natural resting state to feel good, to feel joyful, but we get disrupted. Any thoughts on that before we carry on?
Well, that hasn't been my natural resting state, I can tell you that. But I do
Yeah.
appreciate the comment. I mean, I think everybody is built differently, and diversity is required for the survival of the species, and I think that includes neurodiversity. So we all come at this through different lenses. My default mode, sometimes I'm an introvert; it tends to skew more negative, and it's a practice for me to see the world more positively. But I think that said, everybody's mind, everybody's default can be restructured given the right internal and external factors.
Love it. Your next idea was to engage meaningfully.
Yeah, we have, this ties in with the paying attention piece too. That when we fall into ourselves, when we collapse into ourselves, I used the analogy in my TED talk a number of years ago about when I became suicidal. It was like my perception was collapsing in around me, like a tight, dark bubble that was just suffocating me. And what actually helped me was to breathe some expansiveness into that. The only way you can really do that is by letting other people in whatever way that they can, to see you, to see your pain, your suffering, the warts and all, but to witness the joy as well. So this is why I think we need to so meaningfully and vulnerably engage with other people in our lives, our loved ones, yes, spouses, children, parents, to really make those meaningful connections, but even to complete strangers as well. You would be amazed. I often am, how deep of a connection you can build with somebody who's giving you your coffee, or the bus driver, or whoever it is that you run into in the street, if you just look at them in the eyes and do something as simple as smile. I think we need to engage people at that level.
Yeah, I almost can throw people off. Like when I just get a coffee or whatever in the morning, you can look at the barista and say, "Thank you," and they're like,
Yeah.
"What?" Just like when you change the tone, or like, "Oh, thank you so much," or "How are you doing today?"
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic, and they look at you like you're a little bit
Yeah.
nuts, but it
And
just
and
tweaks
it's
knocks
so
people out of their normal thinking.
It does, but that's what's so necessary, right? Because normal, so-called normal, for some people can be really oppressive. It can be nothing more than a habit. And sometimes it's a bad habit. It's not a productive habit. So anything that can jar us out of that rut that we're in, that autopilot that we're in, it potentiates something in us. It's a wonderful opportunity to do so much more.
Love it. Final thought that you had was around habits and structure. I've been thinking a lot about habits, routines, and rituals, which obviously is doing things that are meaningful on a regular basis. Would love your thoughts on that, just to help us install these new ideas, or these ideas we know we should be doing or can do into our lives.
Well, I'm a firm believer that happiness is a habit, that recovery is a practice, recovery from whatever it is, whether it's a mental illness or not. And part of that habit means recognizing the very real biological factors that might be in play here, whether it's diet related or neurochemical related, and getting the right supports in place there. But we also have to recognize that the way that we live our lives impacts how we feel, that your mental health isn't just all in your head. It's not even just all in your brain, because we're not even actually sure that consciousness is only all in your brain. Again, another separate esoteric conversation. So we need to invite other people into this, and that means creating a habit. Starting small, 1% improvement or increases or change that you're looking for, and building up from there. We know how people learn. They have this zone of proximal development within which they learn, so they can grab onto things one small step at a time rather than reaching too far and feeling like a failure. I've seen that happen countless times with people trying to recover from depression and anxiety, that they reach too far, they want to have the best life in the world. Well, let's just try to get out of bed this morning and see how that goes first. So build those habits up from the ground, and then you'd be surprised how far you come when you finally look back.
Love it. Mark, 5 tactics that are so helpful: paying attention, going after and amplifying joy, reestablishing connection, engaging meaningfully, and build some habits and structure. Thank you so much. What's your vision for mental health in the future? What are you working towards? What is your hopeful outcome for humanity?
Well, I think that what we need to move toward now, we're doing a great job of raising awareness of mental health in silos. Now we need a cross-functional, interdisciplinary, more holistic view of mental health that includes biological, psychological, and social factors. So that's what I'm working toward myself, a more integrated view of mental health.
That's fantastic. Mark, if people want to connect with you or learn more about what you're up to, where can they go online?
I'm at Mark Henick, at MarkHenick on most social platforms: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere else. My website is markhenick.com, and the book is So-Called Normal, a memoir of family depression and resilience. That's available everywhere.
Mark, thanks so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. We want to keep these shows nice and tight because we're respectful of your time. Just want to send out as many ideas for improving as possible. We are so grateful that you joined us for this session. We really appreciate it, and we will see you in another show again soon. Mark, thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.